Block 1. The sound of a vacuum cleaner humming in the hallway mingled with the cold draft slipping beneath the door of Suite 718. I wiped the perspiration from my brow with the back of my hand, the chemical scent of bleach clinging to my skin. 7 hours into my shift at the Grand Meridian Hotel, and my fingers had pruned from scrubbing bathroom tiles with disinfectant. "Housekeeping," I called out, knocking on the adjacent suite. No answer. I inserted my master key and pushed the heavy door open, immediately struck by the contrast between this room and the others I'd cleaned today. The curtains were drawn, creating a twilight atmosphere despite the afternoon sun outside. A crystal decanter of amber liquid sat on a side table beside a half-empty glass. The king-sized bed remained untouched, but a cashmere throw was carelessly draped over the leather armchair. Someone had been here, but hadn't slept. I moved quietly through the room, gathering discarded towels and replacing them with fresh ones. The scent here was different, expensive cologne with notes of leather and wood. Nothing like the generic hotel soap other guests used. My gaze caught on a briefcase in the corner. Its leather so fine it almost glowed in the dim light. This suite cost more per night than I made in 2 weeks. My phone vibrated in my uniform pocket. My sister Masha's name flashed across the screen. I hesitated. We weren't supposed to take personal calls during shifts, but Masha was taking care of my daughter Katya while I worked the double shift. I answered quickly, turning toward the window. "Da, что случилось?" I whispered in Russian, asking what happened. "Katya's fever is back," Masha replied in our native tongue. 103. Should I give her the medicine from yesterday, or take her to urgent care? My heart clenched. The pink bottle in the bathroom cabinet, 2 teaspoons. If it doesn't go down in an hour, call Dr. Petrov. I gave her the number, still speaking Russian, the language feeling like a small connection to home as my words tumbled out faster with worry. That's when I heard it. The soft click of the hotel room door closing. I spun around, nearly dropping my phone. A man stood in the entryway, his silhouette backlit by the hallway light. Tall, broad-shouldered, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit that had clearly been tailored to fit his powerful frame. His dark hair was swept back from his face, revealing features that might have been sculpted, high cheekbones, a strong jaw dusted with the perfect amount of stubble, and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Behind him stood another man, wider and taller, with a blank expression and a slight bulge beneath his jacket that I immediately recognized as a concealed weapon. "I'll call back," I whispered to Masha, ending the call. "I apologize, sir," I said, switching to English, my accent thickening with nervousness. I was just finishing up. The man didn't move from the doorway. Instead, he studied me with an unnerving stillness. Not a leer. I'd experienced plenty of those from hotel guests, but an assessment, as if cataloging every detail about me. "You speak Russian," he said. Not a question, a statement. His voice was deep, tinged with an accent I couldn't quite place. European, but not Russian like mine. "Yes, sir. I'm almost done here." I gathered my cleaning supplies, trying to hide how badly my hands were shaking. "What's your name?" he asked, finally stepping into the room. The bodyguard remained at the door, eyes forward, as still as a statue. "Anastasia," I answered, using the Americanized version of my name that appeared on my name tag, rather than my full name, Anastasia Kuznetsova. "Anastasia," he repeated, making my ordinary name sound like something precious. "You work here every day?" 5 days a week, sir." I edged toward the door, cleaning cart in tow, but he shifted slightly, blocking my exit without seeming to do so deliberately. My pulse quickened as I realized how easily he controlled the space, how completely he dominated the room without raising his voice or making any overtly threatening gestures. "You have family here in the city?" His questions felt casual, but his eyes remained focused, intent. "Just my daughter and sister," I replied, then immediately regretted offering even that small piece of information. Something about this man made me want to disappear, to become as invisible as housekeepers were supposed to be. He nodded slightly, then reached into his jacket pocket. I tensed, but he withdrew only a money clip, peeling off several $100 bills. "For your discretion," he said, extending them toward me. "I value my privacy." I hesitated. The money represented nearly a week's salary, and Katya needed medicine, new shoes, so many things. But something about this interaction felt dangerous, like taking the money would create a connection I couldn't sever. Before I could decide, the door swung open again. Another man entered, younger, sharply dressed in an Italian suit, with a phone pressed to his ear. He stopped abruptly when he saw me. "Dimitri," the first man acknowledged without looking away from me. "We'll continue in a moment." The newcomer's eyes flicked between us, then narrowed slightly. He spoke rapidly into the phone in Italian, then ended the call. "Adrian, we have a situation at the docks. Costello's men are making trouble." Adrian. So that was his name. It didn't sound Russian, but something in the way he carried himself reminded me of the powerful men from my homeland, men who operated in shadows, whose names were whispered rather than spoken aloud. "Handle it," Adrian replied, his eyes still fixed on me. "They're asking for you specifically," Dimitri insisted, saying they'll only deal with the boss. A muscle in Adrian's jaw tightened. After a moment, he tucked the money into the pocket of my uniform, his fingers brushing against the fabric covering my collarbone. The touch, though brief, sent an electric current through my body. "For your daughter," he said quietly. His eyes held mine for one more long moment before he turned away. "Make sure Suite 718 is added to her regular cleaning schedule," he instructed Dimitri as they walked out, "and find out more about our Russian maid." The door closed behind them, and I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My fingers trembled as I reached for the money in my pocket, half convinced it had been a hallucination. But the crisp bills were real, as was the business card tucked between them. Black matte cardstock, with only a phone number embossed in silver. I should have thrown it away. I should have requested a different floor assignment, called in sick the next day, done anything to avoid crossing paths with Adrian again. Instead, I slipped the card into my bra, next to my heart, and told myself it was just for emergencies, just in case Katya's condition worsened and we needed help. I didn't know then that I had already made my first mistake, that by accepting his money, by keeping his card, by speaking Russian in his presence, I had already entered his world. And in Adrian Sokolov's world, nothing happened by accident. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching my mood as I dragged myself out of bed at 5 a.m. Katya's fever had broken during the night, but she remained listless, curled up beside me in the small bed we shared in our one-bedroom apartment. I brushed her dark curls away from her forehead, relieved to find it cool to the touch. "Mama has to go to work," I whispered, kissing her cheek. "Be good for Auntie Masha." Her eyes fluttered open, dark lashes framing eyes identical to mine. "Can I have pancakes?" she mumbled sleepily. "If you're feeling better," I promised, my heart squeezing with love and worry. At 6 years old, she was already too familiar with illness, her immune system weakened by a bout of pneumonia last winter that had nearly claimed her life, and had claimed all of our savings and then some. The hospital bills still arrived monthly, each one a reminder of how precarious our situation remained. Despite working 60-hour weeks at the Grand Meridian and picking up weekend shifts at a local diner, I barely kept us afloat. Medical debt, rent, groceries, and the constant fear that immigration services might question the documentation I'd used to secure employment kept me awake most nights. As I prepared for work in our tiny bathroom, I found myself touching the business card hidden in my wallet. The memory of Adrian's intense gaze made my stomach flutter in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Or at least, not entirely fear. There had been something else in that look. Something that had made me feel seen for the first time since arriving in America 4 years ago. On the subway, pressed between commuters, I tried to focus on my plan for the day. Clean rooms, avoid Suite 718, pick up an extra shift if possible, stop by the pharmacy for Katya's medicine. Simple. Achievable. Safe. But as I swiped my employee card at the service entrance of the Grand Meridian, my supervisor, Gloria, waved me over with a stern expression that immediately set my nerves on edge. "Anastasia, management wants to see you." Her tone suggested I was in trouble, but her eyes held a different emotion. Curiosity, perhaps even concern. "Why?" I asked, my accent thickening as it always did when I was nervous. "Don't know," But when the owner of the hotel asks for a specific maid by name, it's usually not good. She lowered her voice. Did you take something from a room? Break something expensive? No, nothing like that. My mind raced. The owner? Adrian had said to add his suite to my cleaning schedule, but I hadn't expected such a direct intervention. Well, they're waiting in Mr. Petrov's office. She handed me a fresh uniform. Change first. You look like you slept in that one. 10 minutes later, heart hammering against my ribs, I knocked on the hotel manager's door. The plaque read, Viktor Petrov, General Manager, a fellow Russian, though he'd never acknowledged our shared heritage beyond a raised eyebrow at my paperwork when I was hired. Enter, called a voice from within. I stepped inside to find Viktor seated behind his massive desk, his usual look of detached superiority replaced by something approaching deference. Because standing by the window, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline, was Adrian. Today, he wore a deep blue suit that made his shoulders appear even broader. When he turned to look at me, I noticed his eyes weren't black as I'd first thought, but a midnight blue so dark it bordered on obsidian. They warmed slightly as they landed on me. Ah, Anastasia, Viktor said, gesturing for me to sit in the chair opposite his desk. Mr. Sokolov has specifically requested your services. I remained standing, my hands clasped in front of me to hide their trembling. My services? I repeated, glancing between Viktor and Adrian. Mr. Sokolov owns the Meridian Hotel Group, Viktor explained, his tone deferential in a way I'd never heard before. He's requested that you be reassigned as dedicated staff for the penthouse suite. The penthouse. Not just Suite 718, but the crown jewel of the Grand Meridian, occupying the entire top floor with its own private elevator and security. I'd only glimpsed it once during training, marveling at the panoramic views and furnishings that cost more than I would earn in a decade. I don't understand, I said, looking directly at Adrian for the first time since entering the room. I'm just a regular housekeeper. Adrian moved away from the window, each step deliberate. I prefer consistency in my staff, he said, his voice carrying the same quiet authority as yesterday. And I have specific requirements for maintaining my residence. Residence, not suite or room. The realization hit me that Adrian Sokolov didn't just own the hotel. He lived here. The position includes a significant pay increase, Viktor added, sliding a document across the desk. Double your current salary, plus benefits. I stared at the paper without touching it. Double my salary would mean proper medical care for Katya, perhaps even moving to a safer neighborhood. It could change everything. But instinct told me this offer came with invisible strings. I need an answer today, Adrian said, not unkindly. I'll be traveling to Europe tomorrow and require staff arrangements to be finalized. May I ask what the position entails exactly? I managed, proud that my voice remained steady. Adrian nodded to Viktor, who stood and excused himself, closing the door behind him with a soft click. The moment we were alone, the atmosphere shifted, becoming charged with an intensity that made the hair on my arms stand up. The position is straightforward, Adrian said, leaning against the desk, close enough that I could smell his cologne, sandalwood and something darker, more primal. You'll maintain the penthouse, manage household supplies, and ensure privacy is strictly maintained. And my schedule? I asked, thinking of Katya. 6 to 2, Monday through Friday. No weekends, no holidays. His gaze was unwavering. I understand you have a daughter to consider. The mention of Katya sent a chill down my spine. How do you know about my daughter? A slight smile curved his lips. I make it my business to know everything about people who work closely with me, including listening to their phone calls. I dared, remembering how he'd appeared just after my conversation with Masha. Instead of anger, his smile deepened, revealing a dimple in his right cheek that transformed his severe features into something almost approachable. Including that, yes, I should have been outraged at the invasion of privacy. Instead, I felt a perverse appreciation for his honesty. Why me? I asked, the question that had been burning since I'd been summoned. Adrian pushed away from the desk and closed the distance between us. He stopped close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact, yet not so close that it felt threatening. You speak Russian, he said simply. I have many Russian associates. Having staff who understand the language is convenient. There was more to it than that, I was certain. But I didn't press. The salary figure on the contract caught my eye again. It would solve so many problems. If I accept, I said carefully, I would need assurance that the work is legitimate. Adrian's expression hardened for a fraction of a second before he chuckled, the sound low and rich. You're asking if I'm involving you in something illegal. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The position is exactly as described. Housekeeping. Nothing more. He paused, studying me. Though I appreciate your caution, Anastasia Kuznetsova, the use of my full name, my real name, sent a jolt of panic through me. It wasn't on my employment paperwork. It wasn't on anything official in America. How did you... As I said, I make it my business to know. He returned to the desk, picked up an expensive-looking fountain pen, and offered it to me. The choice is yours, but I need an answer now. I took the pen, its weight substantial in my hand. Every instinct for self-preservation screamed to walk away. Yet I couldn't ignore what this opportunity meant for Katya. For us. I signed. Adrian took the pen from my fingers, his own brushing against mine in a touch that felt deliberate. Welcome to my employ, Anastasia. He pressed a keycard into my palm. You start tomorrow. The penthouse exceeded every expectation. Sprawling rooms with soaring ceilings opened onto a wraparound terrace with views that stretched to the horizon. Artwork I recognized from museum textbooks hung on walls, and furniture that belonged in design magazines was arranged throughout the space. It wasn't just wealthy, it was cultured, sophisticated in a way that spoke of old money and refined taste. For 3 days, I worked in solitude, meticulously cleaning spaces that barely showed signs of use. Adrian had left for Europe as mentioned, and I found myself oddly disappointed by his absence. The penthouse felt like a stage set without its main character, beautiful but hollow. On the 4th day, as I was arranging fresh flowers in the main living area, the private elevator hummed to life. My pulse quickened, though I told myself it was merely surprise at the unexpected arrival. I set down the crystal vase and smoothed my uniform, suddenly conscious of my appearance. The elevator doors slid open to reveal not Adrian, but the man he'd called Dmitri, accompanied by 2 unfamiliar men in dark suits. They carried leather briefcases and spoke rapidly in Italian, falling silent when they noticed me. You must be the new girl, Dmitri said, assessing me with cool detachment. Unlike Adrian, whose gaze had felt like it peeled away layers, Dmitri's felt dismissive, as if I were merely another piece of furniture. Coffee for 3, conference room. His tone made it clear he was accustomed to being obeyed without question. I nodded and moved toward the kitchen, listening as they continued down the hallway to what Adrian had referred to as the study on my orientation paperwork, but which appeared to be a fully equipped conference room. As I prepared the coffee service, Adrian's documents had specified exactly how it should be arranged. I heard the murmur of voices rise and fall from the study. Though tempted to linger and listen, I reminded myself of the contract I'd signed, with its extensive confidentiality clauses and penalties for breaches. I knocked once on the study door before entering with the tray. The men fell silent immediately. Spread across the conference table were documents, maps, and what looked like architectural plans. Dmitri quickly gathered them up as I set down the coffee service. That will be all, he said curtly, dismissing me without a glance. I turned to leave, but one of the other men called out in Italian. Though I didn't speak the language, his tone and gesture made it clear he was asking about me. Dmitri responded in the same language, his voice tight. I caught only one word I recognized. Sokolovs. The man raised an eyebrow, looking at me with renewed interest. He said something else, this time with a smirk, and the third man laughed. Though I couldn't understand the words, I recognized the sentiment. I'd heard similar insinuations from hotel guests over the years. Dmitri's response was sharp, silencing them both. He glanced at me, irritation clear on his face. You're dismissed. I left quickly, cheeks burning with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. Whatever they assumed about my relationship with Adrian was not only incorrect but demeaning. I was a housekeeper, nothing more. The fact that my heart had raced at the thought of his return was irrelevant, a foolish reaction to a powerful man who had shown me a modicum of respect. I threw myself into cleaning the guest bathrooms with unnecessary vigor, scrubbing at non-existent stains as I tried to purge the humiliation from my system. So focused was I on my task that I didn't hear the elevator arrive again, didn't notice another presence in the penthouse until a shadow fell across the marble floor. "You're going to wear away the finish," came a familiar deep voice. I jerked upright, nearly dropping the brush. Adrian stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the hallway light. He'd removed his suit jacket and loosened his tie, giving him a slightly more approachable appearance, though no less imposing. "Mr. Sokolov," I gasped. "I didn't expect you back so soon, clearly." His lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "And I thought we'd established you would call me Adrian in private." We had established no such thing, but I didn't correct him. "I prepared the master suite as instructed," I said instead, gathering my cleaning supplies. "Fresh linens, the fret collection you specified." He nodded, watching me with that same intense focus I remembered. "You've been busy while I was away, just doing my job." He stepped into the bathroom, reducing the space between us to mere feet. "And how are you finding it? Your new position?" "It's different," I admitted. "Very quiet. Until Dmitri and his associates arrived?" His question was casual, but something in his tone suggested he was fishing for information. I stiffened. "I don't listen to private conversations, if that's what you're asking." Adrian studied me for a long moment, then smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his severe features and crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I wasn't accusing you, Anastasia. Merely making conversation." The use of my full name, spoken with his slight accent, sent an unwelcome warmth through me. "I should finish up," I said, desperate to escape the confines of the bathroom and the unsettling effect of his presence. "One moment." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "For your daughter. I understand she's been ill." I froze, staring at the box as if it might bite. "That's not necessary." "It's a gift, not payment," he said, voice soft but insistent. "Take it." Against my better judgment, I accepted the box. Inside lay a delicate silver bracelet sized for a child's wrist, adorned with a small star charm. It was beautiful, tasteful, and undoubtedly expensive. "I can't accept this," I said, attempting to return it. Adrian closed my fingers around the box, his hand warm over mine. "You can, and you will." The words were firm but not unkind. "Consider it a welcome gift." Before I could respond, the door to the penthouse burst open, and a woman's voice rang out, high and agitated, speaking rapid-fire Russian. "Adrian! Taigidi!" "Where are you?" Adrian's expression hardened instantly, his jaw tightening as he released my hand. "Stay here," he instructed in a low voice, then strode out of the bathroom toward the commotion. I remained frozen for a moment, the gift box clutched in my hand. Curiosity overrode caution, and I peered around the doorframe to see a striking blonde woman pacing the living room. She wore a red designer dress that hugged her perfect figure, diamonds glittering at her ears and throat. Beautiful, yes, but her face was contorted with anger. "Veronica," Adrian said coldly, stopping several feet away from her. "What are you doing here?" "You missed our dinner," she snapped in accented English, switching from Russian. 2 hours I waited at Le Bernardin. Like a fool. "We had no plans," Adrian replied, his voice controlled but edged with impatience. "And you know better than to show up unannounced." She laughed, the sound brittle. "No plans? Your assistant confirmed yesterday." Her gaze darted around the penthouse, then narrowed as she spotted me hovering in the hallway. "And now I see why you forgot. You're entertaining your staff." The way she spat the last word made my cheeks flame. I retreated into the bathroom, mortified at being caught eavesdropping, but unable to ignore the heated exchange that followed. "That's enough," Adrian said, his voice dropping to a dangerous timbre I hadn't heard before. "You're making a scene based on a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Veronica's voice rose. 3 years together, and suddenly you're too busy for dinner? For me? Ever since Milan, you've been distant. And now I find you here with my housekeeper," Adrian interrupted, each word precise and cutting. "Who is doing her job, which is more than I can say for my assistant if he scheduled something without my knowledge." A tense silence followed, broken by the sound of heels clicking across the marble floor, coming closer to where I stood. I busied myself with organizing cleaning supplies, praying she wouldn't enter. My prayer went unanswered. Veronica appeared in the doorway, her blue eyes cold with disdain as they swept over me from head to toe. "So, this is what catches your eye now?" she asked Adrian, who had followed her. "A maid? How predictable." "That's enough, Veronica." Adrian's voice had gone deadly quiet. He took her elbow, steering her away from the bathroom and from me. "We'll discuss this privately." I remained frozen, humiliation burning through me like acid. To be viewed as nothing more than an object of suspicion, a threat to this glamorous woman's relationship. It was degrading in a way that went beyond the usual invisibility of being household staff. Their voices faded as Adrian guided Veronica toward his study. I heard the door close firmly, followed by the muffled sound of their argument continuing behind it. I should have finished my cleaning and left immediately, but something kept me rooted in place. Pride, perhaps. I refused to scurry away like some guilty secret. I continued working, focusing intently on each task, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. The velvet box with the bracelet remained in my pocket, suddenly feeling like evidence of something inappropriate rather than an innocent gift for a sick child. 20 minutes later, the study door opened. I kept my eyes fixed on the bathroom mirror I was polishing, refusing to look up even as I heard high heels approaching the main entrance, followed by the softer tread of Adrian's Italian leather shoes. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said to Veronica, his voice neutral now, all emotion carefully controlled. "Don't bother," she replied coldly. The elevator doors opened, then closed, and silence descended once more on the penthouse. I sensed rather than heard Adrian approaching the bathroom. He appeared in the doorway, his reflection joining mine in the mirror. His expression was unreadable, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "I apologize for that scene," he said after a moment. I set down my cleaning cloth and turned to face him. "It's not my place to comment on your personal life, Mr. Sokolov." "Back to Mr. Sokolov, is it?" Something flickered in his eyes, amusement, perhaps, or frustration. "And yet you were drawn into my personal life rather dramatically just now." I said nothing, unsure how to respond. Adrian sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. The gesture seemed uncharacteristically human, at odds with his usual controlled demeanor. "Veronica and I have a complicated history. What she implied about you was inappropriate and unfounded. It doesn't matter," I said, though it did. "I should finish up and leave you to your evening." "Do you have plans?" he asked abruptly. The question caught me off guard. "Plans?" "After work, tonight." His gaze was intent, searching my face as if my after-hours activities were somehow of vital importance. I hesitated, then decided there was no harm in honesty. "I pick up my daughter from my sister's, make dinner, help with homework. Nothing special." He nodded, as if confirming something to himself. "And the bracelet. Will you give it to her?" The velvet box seemed to burn in my pocket. "I shouldn't." "But you will," he said, not a question but a statement. "Because it will make her happy." I couldn't deny it. The thought of Katya's face lighting up at the sight of the delicate silver bracelet was already weakening my resolve to return the gift. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. Adrian's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Does there need to be a reason for kindness?" In my experience, yes, the words came out more bitter than I intended, especially from powerful men. Instead of taking offense, he laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face and made him look younger, almost approachable. "Fair enough. Let's say I have my reasons and leave it at that for now." Before I could press further, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened instantly. "I need to take this. We'll continue our conversation another time, Anastasia." He answered the call as he walked away, speaking rapid-fire Italian. I caught only the tension in his voice, the sudden shift from the almost relaxed man who had laughed moments before to the formidable figure who commanded respect with his mere presence. I gathered my cleaning supplies and prepared to leave, trying to ignore the confusion swirling inside me. This job was supposed to be straightforward. Clean the penthouse, maintain privacy, collect a better paycheck. Nothing in the contract mentioned navigating jealous girlfriends or accepting gifts or wondering about the true nature of Adrian Sokolov's interest in me. As I waited for the service elevator, I glanced back at the penthouse. Through the open door of the study, I could see Adrian standing at the window, phone pressed to his ear, his profile severe against the backdrop of the New York skyline, powerful, dangerous, compelling in a way I didn't want to examine too closely. The elevator arrived, and I stepped inside, telling myself that tomorrow would be simpler, that I would maintain professional boundaries and emotional distance, that I would remember who I was and who he was, and all the insurmountable differences those identities entailed. I was lying to myself, of course. But sometimes lies are necessary for survival. "Mama, look. It sparkles." Katya twirled in front of our small bathroom mirror, the silver bracelet glinting on her thin wrist. Her delight was infectious, her smile brighter than I'd seen in weeks. "It's beautiful on you, Solnishko." I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the clean scent of her freshly washed hair, my sunshine, my light. "But remember what I said. It's very special, so you must be careful with it." "I'll never take it off," she declared, with the absolutism of a 6-year-old. "Is it from a secret admirer?" I nearly choked on my tea. "Where did you learn that phrase?" Auntie Masha was watching a show. Katya shrugged, still admiring the bracelet. "She said sometimes ladies get presents from secret admirers who love them." "It's just from a friend," I said carefully. "Now, time for bed. You have school tomorrow." Later, after Katya had fallen asleep, I sat at our tiny kitchen table with Masha, nursing a glass of cheap wine. "A friend, huh?" Masha arched an eyebrow, unconvinced. "Must be some friend to give silver jewelry to a child he's never met." "It's not like that," I insisted, though I wasn't entirely sure what it was like. "He's my employer." Masha's eyes widened. "The hotel owner? Nastya, what are you getting yourself into?" "Nothing. It was a get-well gift, that's all." I took a large swallow of wine. "His daughter probably has dozens of bracelets like that." "Does he have a daughter?" The question stopped me short. I realized I knew almost nothing about Adrian's personal life beyond what I'd witnessed with Veronica. "I don't know," I admitted. Masha leaned forward, her expression serious. "Listen to me. Men like that, rich, powerful, they don't give gifts without expecting something in return. Be careful." "I know what I'm doing," I said, more to convince myself than her. "It's just a job. A good one that pays well and gives us stability." Masha didn't look convinced, but she dropped the subject, turning instead to gossip about her co-workers at the diner. I only half listened, my mind drifting back to the moment in the bathroom when Adrian's laugh had transformed him from intimidating boss to something far more dangerous, a man I could find myself attracted to. The next week passed in a strange rhythm. Adrian was rarely at the penthouse during my shifts, but evidence of his presence accumulated in small ways: a glass of scotch left on the terrace, a tie draped over a chair, books moved from shelves to bedside tables. I found myself studying these small signs, piecing together a picture of the man from the fragments he left behind. His taste in literature surprised me. Russian classics like Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, yes, but also poetry, philosophy, even contemporary fiction. One day, I found a collection of Akhmatova's work, the pages dog-eared and annotated in a strong, slanting hand. I traced my fingers over his handwritten notes in the margins, this unexpected glimpse into his mind more intimate than anything I'd encountered in his personal spaces. On Friday, as I was preparing to leave, the private elevator hummed to life. Adrian stepped out, accompanied by the silent bodyguard I'd seen that first day. Both men looked exhausted, Adrian's usual immaculate appearance slightly rumpled, as if he'd been wearing the same suit for too long. "Anastasia," he acknowledged me with a nod. "I thought you'd be gone by now." "Just finishing up," I replied, suddenly conscious of having let my hair down from its usual practical bun. "You're back earlier than expected." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You've been tracking my schedule? It affects my work," I said quickly, feeling heat rise to my cheeks, knowing when to expect occupancy. "Of course." He shrugged out of his suit jacket, wincing slightly as he rolled his shoulder. "Are you injured?" The question escaped before I could stop it. Adrian's expression closed immediately. Nothing serious. A minor disagreement. The bodyguard made a sound that might have been a suppressed snort. Adrian shot him a look, and the man retreated to take up position by the door with a murmured, "I'll be outside, boss." Once we were alone, Adrian loosened his tie and sank onto the sofa with uncharacteristic weariness. "You have a good eye, Anastasia." "Most people wouldn't notice. I notice everything," I said simply. "It's part of the job. And what else have you noticed?" He gestured for me to sit, but I remained standing, aware that I was already 15 minutes past the end of my shift. "That you read Akhmatova in the original Russian," I said, nodding toward the book on the side table. "That you prefer Macallan to Glenlivet. That you sleep on the right side of the bed, even though you live alone." He looked genuinely surprised, then impressed. "Observant indeed. And what conclusions have you drawn from these observations?" I hesitated, then decided honesty was safest. "That you're more complex than you appear at first glance. That you value privacy but live in a hotel. That you're Russian, or at least have strong ties there, but prefer to speak English." Adrian studied me with renewed interest, as if seeing me properly for the first time. "All accurate. You'd make a formidable intelligence agent, Anastasia Kuznetsova. I'm just a housekeeper," I reminded him, though we both knew it wasn't that simple. "My shoulder was dislocated," he said abruptly, changing the subject. "An old injury that sometimes flares up." I nodded, recognizing the lie but accepting it. Whatever had caused his injury, it wasn't my business. "Ice and rest will help. Are you a doctor as well as a housekeeper?" There was that hint of amusement again, warming his dark eyes. "No, just a mother. Children are constantly hurting themselves." I glanced at my watch. "Speaking of which, I need to go. Katya will be waiting." "How is she? Did she like the bracelet?" The genuine interest in his voice caught me off guard. "She loves it. She wanted me to thank her secret admirer." Adrian laughed, then winced as the movement jarred his shoulder. "A secret admirer at 6. She's precocious." "She gets that from her father," I said without thinking, then immediately regretted it. I never spoke of Mikhail. Not to anyone here in America. Adrian's eyes sharpened with interest. "I wasn't aware you were married." "I'm not," I said shortly, wishing I could retract the comment. "I'm a widow." It wasn't entirely true, but it was simpler than the reality. Mikhail had been my husband in every way but legally. We'd planned to marry when I discovered I was pregnant. But by then it was already too late. He'd been arrested for his involvement in a pro-democracy protest in Moscow, disappeared into the system, and emerged 6 months later as a shell of his former self. He'd died of pneumonia in prison a week before Katya was born, though the bruises on his body told a different story. "I'm sorry," Adrian said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Recently? 4 years ago, before we came to America." I moved toward the door, desperate to end this conversation before I revealed more than was safe. "I should go." Adrian stood, moving with the fluid grace that always seemed at odds with his powerful build. "Of course. But before you leave..." He reached into his pocket and withdrew an envelope. "For you." I eyed it warily. "What is this?" "Tickets," he said, holding out the envelope. "The Bolshoi Ballet is performing at Lincoln Center this weekend. Sleeping Beauty. I thought your daughter might enjoy it." I stared at him in disbelief. Ballet tickets were far beyond my means, especially for a prestigious company like the Bolshoi. "Why would you..." "Consider it a bonus for your excellent work," he said smoothly, pressing the envelope into my hands. 2 tickets, Saturday matinee. Unless you already have plans?" "No, but..." "Then it's settled." His tone brooked no argument. "My driver will collect you at noon." "Your driver?" I shook my head, finding my voice. "That's unnecessary, and inappropriate." Adrian's expression hardened slightly. "New York traffic is unpredictable. I'd hate for you to miss the performance." "Mr. Sokolov, Adrian..." I took a breath, steadying myself. "You're being very generous, but I can't accept this. The bracelet was already too much." "You can, and you will." The same words he'd used about the bracelet, delivered with the same quiet certainty. "Your daughter deserves beautiful experiences, doesn't she? It was a masterful manipulation. Invoking Katya made refusal almost impossible. Still, I hesitated. People will talk. Let them. He shrugged, then winced again at the movement. We both know the truth of the situation. Did we? I wasn't sure I knew anything anymore, least of all the truth of whatever was developing between us. But the thought of Katya's face when I told her we were going to the ballet. Thank you, I said finally, tucking the envelope into my bag. Katya will be thrilled. And you? His eyes held mine, searching. Will you enjoy it as well? The question felt weighted with meaning I couldn't quite decipher. I love ballet, I admitted, though I haven't seen a performance since leaving Russia. Something like satisfaction crossed his features. Then I've chosen well. Enjoy your evening, Anastasia. As I rode the service elevator down, clutching the envelope of tickets, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just agreed to something far more significant than a ballet performance, that with each gift accepted, each personal detail shared, I was being drawn deeper into Adrian's world, a world I still understood only in fragments and glimpses. A real ballet? Katya spun in circles around our tiny living room, her arms raised in a clumsy approximation of a ballerina's pose. With tutus and toe shoes and everything? Real ballet, I confirmed, laughing at her enthusiasm. The Bolshoi is the most famous company in Russia. Mama used to watch them when I was a girl. Katya stopped spinning, her eyes wide. Will they do the dance from the music box Babushka gave me? The music box had been my mother's final gift to her granddaughter before we fled Russia. A delicate thing with a tiny ballerina that rotated to the waltz of the flowers. Different ballet, Solnishko. This one is Sleeping Beauty. Like the princess? She resumed her spinning, nearly knocking over a lamp in her excitement. Do I get to wear a dress? Your best dress, I promised, catching her mid-twirl and lifting her into a hug. Her small body felt warm and solid against mine, her heart beating like a bird's. And we're going in a fancy car. Masha, who had been listening from the kitchen doorway, raised an eyebrow. A fancy car? Provided by your generous employer, I assume. I set Katya down. Go brush your teeth, little one. It's bedtime. Once Katya had scampered off to the bathroom, I turned to Masha. It's just a car service, to make sure we arrive on time, Nastya. Masha crossed her arms. This man gives your daughter silver jewelry. Now ballet tickets and a private car? You're smart enough to know what this looks like. It's not like that, I insisted, though the doubt in her eyes mirrored my own uncertainties. He's just being kind. Men like that aren't kind without reason, Masha replied, her voice dropping to ensure Katya wouldn't overhear. What does he want from you? The question had been haunting me since I'd left the penthouse. What did Adrian Sokolov want from a widowed immigrant housekeeper? If physical attraction was his goal, there were far more direct approaches available to a man of his wealth and power. If he simply needed reliable household staff, the gifts and personal attention were unnecessary. I don't know, I admitted finally, but the tickets will make Katya happy. After everything she's been through, doesn't she deserve one magical afternoon? Masha's expression softened. Of course she does. Just be careful, Nastya. This feels like a fairy tale, but remember, those always have a monster somewhere in the story. Her words stayed with me late into the night, as I lay beside Katya's sleeping form, listening to her soft breaths. In the fairy tales our mother had told us, the monsters were obvious. Bears with iron teeth, witches in houses of bones, wolves dressed as grandmothers. But in the real world, monsters wore expensive suits and offered kindnesses that bound you to them thread by silken thread until you were too entangled to escape. Yet as I drifted toward sleep, it wasn't fear that colored my thoughts of Saturday, but a treacherous anticipation. The car that arrived at our apartment building was not the discreet town car I had expected, but a gleaming black Rolls-Royce with tinted windows. The driver, a broad-shouldered man with the unmistakable bearing of security rather than chauffeur, held the door open as Katya and I approached. Ms. Kuznetsova, he greeted me with a slight nod. Mr. Sokolov sends his compliments. Katya clutched my hand, momentarily shy in the face of such luxury. She wore her best dress, blue velvet with a white collar, purchased second-hand but carefully mended and pressed for the occasion. I'd spent hours on my own appearance as well, wearing the only dress I owned that wasn't strictly utilitarian, a deep green wrap dress that had once, in another life, been worn to gallery openings and theater premieres in Moscow. "Mama, it's like a spaceship inside," Katya whispered as we slid into the leather interior. She ran her small hands over the seats in wonder, then noticed the small package resting on the center console. "What's that?" Before I could stop her, she'd picked up the box with its elegant silver ribbon. The card attached bore only my first name in that same strong, slanting handwriting I'd seen in the margins of Adrian's books. "Is it a present?" Katya asked, bouncing slightly in her seat. "Can I open it?" "It's for me, I think," I said, gently taking the box. I hesitated, then carefully untied the ribbon. Inside, nestled in black velvet, lay a pair of earrings, teardrop emeralds surrounded by tiny diamonds. They caught the light filtering through the car windows, sending prisms dancing across Katya's awestruck face. "They're green like your dress, Mama," she breathed, "like a princess." They were also clearly genuine, and worth more than I earned in months. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the note beneath them. "To compliment your eyes, enjoy the performance, A." A flush of heat crawled up my neck. The earrings were exquisite, precisely matched to my dress, which meant Adrian had noticed what I wore, had remembered, had selected jewelry specifically to enhance my appearance. It was a level of attention that went far beyond employer-employee propriety. "Aren't you going to put them on?" Katya asked, still entranced by the sparkling gems. I should have left them in the box, should have returned them with a polite but firm note about boundaries and appropriate gifts. Instead, I removed my simple silver studs and replaced them with the emeralds, their weight unfamiliar against my skin. "Beautiful," the driver commented, catching my eye in the rearview mirror. Something in his expression, knowing, perhaps even sympathetic, made me wonder how many other women had received similar gifts in this same car. The thought should have doused my pleasure in cold reality. Instead, I found myself wondering if any of them had felt this same conflicted thrill, this dangerous anticipation. Lincoln Center emerged before us, its grand plaza filled with Saturday afternoon crowds. The driver pulled up directly to the entrance, ignoring the signs prohibiting private vehicles. "Mr. Sokolov arranged for priority entrance," he informed me, coming around to open our door. "Someone will meet you inside. Enjoy the ballet, Ms. Kuznetsova." "Thank you," I murmured, helping Katya from the car. She stared up at the towering glass facades and well-dressed patrons with wide eyes. "Are we really allowed in there?" she whispered, suddenly intimidated by the grandeur surrounding us. I knelt to her level, straightening the collar of her dress. "Of course we are, Solnishko. Today we belong anywhere we wish to be. If only I could make myself believe it." Inside, we were met by an elegant woman who introduced herself as the house manager. "Mr. Sokolov's guests?" she inquired, though it clearly wasn't a question. "Please follow me." She led us not to the orchestra seats I had expected, but to a private box overlooking the stage. Plush velvet chairs awaited, along with a small table bearing a bottle of champagne in an ice bucket, a glass of apple juice, and a plate of delicate pastries. "Wow," Katya breathed, immediately gravitating toward the sweets. "Are these all for us?" "Mr. Sokolov wished you to have the full experience," the manager said with a practiced smile. "Please enjoy. The performance begins in 20 minutes. When she'd gone, I helped Katya settle into her seat with a napkin to protect her dress from the pastry flakes. She swung her legs excitedly, pointing out the gilded decorations and crystal chandeliers with gasps of delight. I sat beside her, acutely aware of the emeralds at my ears, the luxury surrounding us, the stares from patrons in nearby boxes, who clearly wondered about the identity of the occupants in what was likely known as Adrian Sokolov's private box. The champagne remained untouched. I needed clarity today, not the false courage alcohol might provide. As the lights dimmed and the orchestra began the overture, I felt a presence behind us. Turning, I found Adrian standing in the entrance to our box, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. He'd been watching us, watching me, with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. "I thought you weren't coming," I said softly, mindful of Katya's attention fixed on the stage. I had business nearby, he replied, moving to take the third seat in our box. I hope you don't mind the intrusion. Mind? The question seemed absurd, given that we were there entirely by his generosity. Of course not. It's your box. And yet I find I'm the one who feels like an intruder. His gaze moved to Katya, who remained oblivious to his arrival, entranced by the dancers now appearing on stage. She looks happy. She is. Thank you for this. I touched one of the earrings self-consciously. And for these, though they're far too extravagant. They suit you, he said simply. I knew they would. Before I could respond, Katya finally noticed our companion. She turned, curiosity overcoming her shyness. Are you Mama's boss? She asked with the directness only children can manage. Adrian's lips curved into a genuine smile. I am. My name is Adrian. I am Katya. She studied him with undisguised interest. Did you give Mama the pretty earrings? And my bracelet? Katya, I admonished gently. That's not polite to ask. It's quite all right, Adrian assured me. To Katya, he nodded. Yes, I did. Do you like ballet? She nodded enthusiastically. It's magical. Like flying, but on your toes. A perfect description, he agreed, his expression softening in a way I hadn't witnessed before. I think you'll especially enjoy the bluebird variation in the third act. As the ballet progressed, I found my attention divided between the exquisite performance on stage and the equally compelling drama unfolding in our box. Katya had gradually abandoned her initial shyness, peppering Adrian with whispered questions during the interludes. To my surprise, he answered each one with patient detail, explaining the story and pointing out particularly difficult technical elements with the knowledge of a true aficionado. My mother was a dancer with the Mariinsky, he explained when I raised an eyebrow at his expertise. Before I was born. It was the first personal detail he'd volunteered about his family, and I found myself hungry for more. Did she teach you to appreciate ballet? A shadow crossed his face, in a manner of speaking. She died when I was 8. I'm sorry, I said, recognizing the familiar pain of early loss in his expression. He shrugged, the gesture dismissive yet somehow vulnerable. It was a long time ago. Katya, oblivious to the undercurrents of our conversation, tugged at Adrian's sleeve as the orchestra began the waltz from Act 1. This is like my music box, she exclaimed. The one from Babushka. Adrian leaned closer to hear her over the music. Is that so? Your grandmother gave you a music box? Before we left Russia, Katya nodded. It plays this song and has a little ballerina that spins. A treasured possession, then, he observed, glancing at me with a question in his eyes. I nodded slightly. One of the few things we brought with us. The conversation might have continued, but the appearance of the lilac fairy on stage recaptured Katya's attention. She fell silent, enraptured by the performance, unconsciously mimicking the fairy's arm movements from her seat. She has an eye for it, Adrian murmured, his breath warm against my ear. The precision, the timing. She's always loved dance, I replied, equally quiet. But lessons. I trailed off, unwilling to mention the financial impossibility. Adrian said nothing, but I felt the weight of his gaze. Thoughtful, calculating. I recognized the look from our previous interactions, the expression he wore when pieces were falling into place in some private strategy. It should have frightened me, but instead, I felt a dangerous thrill of anticipation. When the final curtain fell, Katya applauded until her small hands must have stung, her face glowing with delight. That was the most beautiful thing ever, she declared. Even better than movies, Adrian laughed. That same unguarded sound I'd heard so rarely. High praise indeed. Are you hungry? I've arranged for an early dinner if you'd care to join me. The invitation caught me off guard. The ballet had already been excessive. Dinner would push us further into the realm of... what? I wasn't sure what to call this arrangement, but it had long since transcended normal professional boundaries. Please, Mama, Katya pleaded, clearly enchanted by both the ballet and our mysterious benefactor. I'm starving. Just a light meal, Adrian added, noting my hesitation. At the Russian tea room, it seemed appropriate given the performance. The Russian tea room, one of New York's iconic restaurants. and a place I'd walked past but never imagined entering. "We're not dressed for such a place," I hedged, though my excuse sounded weak even to my own ears. Adrian's eyes traveled over my green dress, lingering on the emerald earrings that matched it so perfectly. "You look exquisite," he said quietly. "Both of you are perfectly attired." The compliment, delivered with such simple certainty, sent warmth flooding through me. "Then we accept. Thank you." His hand settled briefly at the small of my back as he guided us from the theater, the touch light but unmistakably possessive. Around us, I noticed curious glances, whispers behind programs and opera glasses. Adrian Sokolov was evidently well known in these circles, and his appearance with a woman and child was causing ripples of interest. Outside, the same Rolls-Royce waited at the curb. The driver opened the door without a word, and Adrian helped Katya into the back seat before offering me his hand. His fingers were warm and strong around mine, lingering a moment longer than necessary after I was seated. The Russian tea room was only blocks away, but in the cocoon of the luxury car, it felt as if we were traversing more than mere physical distance. Katya chattered excitedly about the ballet, while Adrian listened with unexpected patience. I remained quiet, watching the interaction with a mixture of pleasure and unease. They looked right together somehow, this powerful man and my bright-eyed daughter, connected by a shared appreciation of beauty and art that transcended their vastly different worlds. The restaurant interior was exactly as I remembered from the glimpses I'd caught through its windows: red leather banquettes, samovars gleaming on shelves, the famous bear-shaped aquarium. The maitre d' greeted Adrian by name, leading us to a private booth in a secluded corner. "Wow," Katya breathed, eyes wide as she took in the opulent surroundings. "It looks like a palace. It's designed to remind Russians of home while impressing Americans," Adrian explained with a wry smile. "A bit theatrical, but the food is authentic." He ordered for us in fluent Russian, selecting dishes I hadn't tasted since leaving Moscow. Proper borscht with sour cream, pelmeni with butter and dill, blini with caviar, though he requested sturgeon roe for Katya, correctly guessing that traditional caviar might be too salty for her palate. As we ate, I observed Adrian with new eyes. Here, surrounded by reminders of his heritage, he seemed more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. The dangerous edge that usually accompanied his presence temporarily softened. He even smiled, really smiled, when Katya declared the cherry vareniki better than ice cream. "You've made quite an impression on my daughter," I said, when Katya excused herself to visit the ornate bathroom, accompanied by a waitress at Adrian's insistence. "She's a remarkable child," he replied, swirling the vodka in his glass. "Bright, observant, much like her mother." I felt a flush of pride, mingled with something more complex as I met his dark gaze across the table. "Why are you doing all this? The tickets, dinner, it's excessive for a mere employee." Adrian set down his glass, studying me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. "Perhaps you've never been merely anything to me, Anastasia." The admission hung between us, weighted with implications I wasn't prepared to consider. "I don't understand what you want from me." "Don't you?" His expression grew serious. "I think you understand perfectly, but you're afraid to acknowledge it." Before I could respond, Katya returned, exclaiming over the golden faucets in the bathroom. The moment of tension dissolved as Adrian signaled for dessert to be brought, honey cake and tea served from a samovar, completing our Russian feast. By the time we emerged from the restaurant, twilight had fallen over the city. Katya, full of sugar and excitement, leaned against me drowsily as Adrian directed the driver to take us home. "Today was like a fairy tale," she murmured, fighting to keep her eyes open as the car glided through Manhattan traffic. "Can we do it again sometime?" Adrian, seated across from us, met my gaze over her head. "Perhaps, if your mother agrees." The question in his eyes was clear, and I found myself nodding slightly, unable to deny my daughter, or myself, the pleasure of his company, despite the warning bells that continued to sound in the back of my mind. Katya was fully asleep by the time we reached our apartment building, her head heavy against my shoulder. Adrian dismissed the driver with a quiet word, then insisted on carrying my exhausted daughter upstairs. "It's not necessary," I protested. "I can manage." "I'm sure you can," he replied. already lifting Katya's slight form in his arms. You've managed everything on your own for years. Allow me this small courtesy. Too tired to argue, I led him up the 4 flights of stairs to our apartment, acutely conscious of how the modest surroundings would appear to someone accustomed to penthouses and private boxes. I unlocked the door with a whispered apology for the cramped space. Adrian said nothing as he carried Katya to the bedroom I indicated, laying her gently on the bed with unexpected tenderness. He stepped back as I removed her shoes and covered her with a blanket, brushing a kiss against her forehead. "Thank you," I said softly as we retreated to the tiny living area, "for everything today. It meant a lot to her." "And to you?" Adrian asked, standing too close in the confined space, his presence filling the room in a way that had nothing to do with his physical size. "Yes," I admitted. "It was beautiful." He reached out, his fingers brushing my cheek in a touch so light it might have been imagined. "You deserve beautiful things, Anastasia. You and your daughter both. We have everything we need," I said, though even to my ears the assertion sounded hollow. Need and deserve are different concepts. His hand moved to my ear, fingers tracing the emerald earring I still wore. "These suit you, as I knew they would. Accept them as a gift freely given, with no obligations attached." "There are always obligations," I whispered, fighting the urge to lean into his touch. "Everything has a price." Adrian's expression darkened. "Is that what you believe? That I expect payment for my generosity?" I don't know what to believe anymore. The admission cost me, but honesty seemed the only path forward. "I don't understand what's happening between us." "Then let me be clear." His voice dropped lower, intimate in the silence of the apartment. "I want you, Anastasia. Not as an employee, not as a conquest. As a woman who fascinates me, challenges me, sees me clearly despite all my attempts at concealment. The declaration should have shocked me, but some part of me had known this was coming since that first moment in Suite 718 when our eyes had met. "It's impossible," I said, though my body betrayed me, leaning closer to him. "You're... and I'm... 2 people who want each other," he finished for me. "The rest is circumstance, not substance." His hand slid to the nape of my neck, warm and sure. I should have pulled away, should have reminded him of Veronica, of professional boundaries, of all the reasons this was a catastrophic idea. Instead, I remained motionless as he lowered his head, his breath mingling with mine for a suspended moment before his lips touched mine. The kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. When I didn't resist, it deepened, becoming something hungry and insistent that awakened an answering need within me. My hands found their way to his chest, feeling the solid strength beneath expensive fabric, the rapid beat of his heart mirroring my own. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, reality came crashing back. "This can't happen," I said, stepping back. "You have a girlfriend. I work for you. My daughter." "Veronica and I are finished," he interrupted. "Have been for weeks, despite her reluctance to accept it. As for your employment, that can be arranged differently if it concerns you." "And what about Katya?" I challenged. "What place does she have in this, whatever this is?" Adrian's expression softened as he glanced toward the bedroom where she slept. "I meant what I said. She's remarkable. I would never do anything to harm her or come between you." "You barely know us," I argued, though my resistance was weakening by the moment. "I know enough." His certainty was both frightening and alluring. The rest we discovered together. He reached for me again, and this time, I didn't resist as he drew me against him, his arms encircling me in an embrace that felt, against all reason, like coming home. "Stay," I whispered against his chest, "just for a while." He did, holding me on the second-hand sofa as I told him about Mikhail, about our escape from Russia after his death, about the struggles and small triumphs of building a life for Katya in a new country. He listened without interruption, one hand stroking my hair, the other holding mine as if it were something precious. In turn, he shared fragments of his own story, his childhood in St. Petersburg, the loss of his mother, his rise through the ranks of various enterprises until he'd built his current empire. He spoke elliptically about his business dealings, and I didn't press. understanding instinctively that there were aspects of his life better left unexamined for now. Dawn was breaking when he finally rose to leave, pressing a kiss to my forehead with a promise to call later. At the door, he turned back, his expression more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. I meant what I said, Anastasia. There are no obligations here. If you want to step back, return to a purely professional relationship. Say the word, and it's done. No consequences, no hard feelings. The offer of freedom only cemented my decision, and if I don't want to step back, his smile was slow and devastating. Then we move forward, together, one day at a time. After he left, I stood at the window watching as his car pulled away from the curb. In the bedroom, Katya still slept peacefully, the silver bracelet glinting on her wrist in the early morning light. Whatever happened next would affect her too. A reality that tempered my newfound happiness with caution. 2 months later, we moved into a spacious apartment in a secure building owned by one of Adrian's companies. Katya started at a private school with a strong arts program, flourishing under ballet instruction that Adrian arranged with former colleagues of his mother. I left my position at the hotel, though not my work entirely. Adrian understood my need for independence, for an identity beyond being his partner. As for Adrian himself, he remained in many ways the complex, sometimes dangerous man I'd first encountered. His business dealings still included elements I chose not to examine too closely, and there were rooms in his life I hadn't yet entered. But with me, with Katya, he showed a side that few others witnessed. Tender, vulnerable, capable of a love so fierce it sometimes frightened me with its intensity. There were complications, of course. Whispers followed us at social events. Speculation about the Russian maid who had somehow captured the untouchable Adrian Sokolov. Veronica made a scene at a restaurant once, her accusations sliding off Adrian like water as he calmly escorted us out, his hand protective at my back. His associates regarded me with varying degrees of curiosity, respect, and in some cases, poorly concealed disdain. None of it mattered when we were alone together. When he read Russian fairy tales to Katya before bed, his deep voice giving life to the stories of my childhood. Or when he held me through the nightmares that still sometimes came, whispering reassurances in a mixture of English and Russian until the shadows receded. "Do you regret it?" he asked me once, late at night as we stood on the terrace of the penthouse that was now as much mine as his. Answering that call in Russian? I leaned back against his chest, his arms secure around me as we gazed at the glittering city below. Never. It brought me to you. His lips brushed my temple, a gesture that had become as familiar as breathing. It brought us both home, and in that moment, with the weight of his emerald ring on my finger, and the future stretching bright before us, I knew he was right. After years of running, of surviving, of merely existing, I had finally found my place in the world, not as the invisible maid who answered a call in Russian, but as the woman who had captured a heart as complex and unyielding as my own. Some would call it a fairy tale, others, a calculated risk. I called it simply what it was. A love powerful enough to bridge worlds, to heal wounds, to create a family from the broken pieces of our separate lives. And for that, I would answer his call 1,000 times over.